This is day 6 of the June 91 7-day retreat at Springwater. I didn't take time to put down questions yesterday, but 3 things came up or have not been dealt with, have come up before. I don't think we have had a verbatim question on time, but people have wondered about what time is, and could a talk deal with this phenomenon of time? Also, we haven't addressed the question put earlier: how am I to deal with the suffering, the injustice that is going on all around me, throughout the world? Maybe the urge to do something and the frustration about not doing anything. I also don't remember that we spoke much about the question, do I need inspiration to motivate this work? I find that inspiration helps carry on this work. And what is the extent of what is the function of emotional involvement? There, the connection being made between something inspiring and what is felt as an emotion of happiness or joy. And maybe the question, should I be emotional in meditative practice? Maybe having heard that emotions have no place there or need to be transcended. Usually, emotions involve thought and remembrance, don't they? We have dealt with it quite a bit throughout this retreat. Thinking about sad things of the past, the remembrance of it, maybe not even verbal, but a remembrance being there of having been happy or hurt, and that remembrance being triggered by something, now a similar situation, somewhat reminiscent of what was. Memories deposited in the brain associate with each other. They are interconnected, and the connection is throughout the body too. So something this instant may, on that path, trigger remembrances of something similar in the past. And with that, the joy, or let's rather say, the good feelings, reserving the word joy for something else, pleasurable feelings through remembrance, or sad feelings, hurt feelings. Maybe feeling humiliated now in a situation because somewhere one hasn't been conscious of, it has associated with a past early childhood situation of humiliation. Sometimes a remembrance comes up, particularly during a retreat when there's not so much conscious controlling going on. Old, maybe forgotten or repressed memories surge up and they're there to be seen. And then thought says, yes, this is the connection between what was and what is happening now. Or maybe there's not even any thought necessary, it's so obvious. And sometimes in such an incidence or coincidence directly seen, there's a release of energy. It's not that one feel so darkly driven to feel sad or depressed or humiliated. It's clear this caused that. But I don't think it's just seeing the causal connection that it's seeing that releases the energy, not what is seen. That's of minor importance. That there is seeing is of utter significance. Seeing meaning an opening without escaping or grasping. The grasper or escaper not being around. So do I need inspiration? Maybe in doing this work or sitting down, walking quietly, maybe not to think one has to need anything, not to know what one needs, not to put stock in all what one has believed in the past one needs and has to have, and all the belief systems connected with that. Then help one needs of the saints or the bodhisattvas. Once we believe that strongly, then there's expectation set up in the mind and striving toward something which is not this simple, childlike openness, innocent, as it were, to find what's there this moment without having expected it. Usually when insight happens, it's an astonishing thing. One hasn't expected it. Expectation leads to further expectation and thought and imagination or effort and strain. But insight comes unexpectedly and is accompanied by a feeling of joy, energy. Discovering something is its own, if we want to use the word inspiration. Not discovery lingering in memory and then drawn upon to make oneself feel energetic again or motivated. Then we're living in the realm of remembrance and wanting and striving, which is the reinforcement of this whole structure which we call me. Me insufficient, me needing to be sufficient, and all of the ways to try to get to sufficiency. That's a very narrow closet. Even though it can sort of stretch into a narrow tunnel, maybe an endless tunnel, trying to get to the end of it, where the light is their little pinhole. But discovering the narrowness of expectation, of the motive to get something, or to get someplace, discovering that, seeing that directly, that is tremendous joy and energy, which comes as a surprise, as something new and unexpected. Maybe this is leading us into this whole question of time. What is time? This talk, I looked on the watch, started at 10:27, and it's a social convenience for us if we want to get together for something, to know a common time at which it starts. 11:27, we'll hear, or 10:27. The sitting before started. Whenever that started, I don't remember. So we can look on the schedule. We have a watch. Our watch is hanging in the hall. We check the schedule with a watch and have a time to get here together and to start on time. It's a convenience. If we didn't know when it started, people would be coming at later times. Same with eating time. So there is a social convention that has developed over the time of civilization to agree on time together so that we can do things conveniently together. We have also a feeling that the rising and setting of sun has something to do with time, that the change of seasons has something to do with time, that spring turns into summer, summer turns into autumn, autumn turns into winter, and then again. But this is for a place where seasons change. What about a place where seasons don't change very noticeably at all? Maybe one that has subtle differentiations between hotter and not so hot in India. What about the sun rising and the sun setting? We do say this is a new day and we give a number to that day, depending on what calendar we're using. Throughout history, different calendars were used. But we can agree on one. But whether time has elapsed between sunrise and sunset, even though the calendar or the watch say it has, can be questioned. Well, the time has elapsed between spring and summer. That's hazy anyways. This is summer weather, isn't it? How do we, if we're willing and interested in questioning it, how do we establish, other than the time we just talked about, how do we establish this feeling of time elapsing? And we're not talking right now about the watch, we can understand that. But the feeling at sunset that a whole day has gone by. I wonder whether a little child at sunset feels that the day has gone by. Maybe mother or father say it's time to go to bed, and the child doesn't feel like going to bed, wants to play. Doesn't remember that the sun rose and it got up. It wants to be right now playing, or where the parents are, not shoved on into bed, which happens so often. How do we develop this sense that time is going by, or time is of the essence as an expression? Sometimes we say, gosh, this retreat has gone by so fast. And sometimes the feeling may be there, it'll never end. What makes for this feeling of time lingering or time passing faster than one wants it to? I remember that there was a time early in my life when there wasn't any feeling that time was going fast. I definitely remember, not the age, but when this came up in the mind, gosh, this went by fast. And that thinking earlier, that wasn't there. There was no time sense. How does it happen? What is the carrier of this time sense? This is already a loaded question. What makes for this feeling? I have to hurry. I won't get there on time. Well, we're back into the clock time then. I have to be at a certain time at the office, and if I'm late continuously, I will be fired. But the feeling, it's gone by so fast, or will it ever end? What is making for that feeling? What enables us to feel that way? Another puzzling thing I came upon in doing Zen training, a statement by a teacher that firewood does not turn into ashes. It's a very puzzling thing. And yet somehow not to be dropped or discarded. It's stuck, wondering what that meant. How could anybody say that? Obviously, firewood turns into ashes. Obviously, a little tomato plant put into the ground grows, becomes a vine, and eventually there are first little yellow flowers and little tiny green buttons which grow, and then there's larger, and then reddening, and then finally a big red ripe tomato. So obviously, and by the time one put the tomato plant in, it had already started earlier with a seed. So the seed turned into the tomato. One can think about it in retrospect. As one picks the red tomato, one can remember when it was green, remember when it was tiny, remember when it was a yellow flower, remember when there was no flower, just the green leaves, maybe waiting to see a flower, remembering when it was a tiny plant just stuck into the ground, or a seed pushed with a thumb into a hole and the earth smoothed over. That memory, tracing it back, says the seed turned into a tomato. Without memory, we couldn't say that, could we? Without memory, we couldn't say these ashes here, white and fluffy, next day, well, they're still hot, they're not good to touch, they burn. Maybe have red coals in between them. But it's memory that says these white ashes yesterday were a log I put in there. Remember putting the fire to it? And then it turned dark, and then I remember it turned red, and then a few white spots appearing, and then at one point the thing collapsing into many different pieces, and less black, more and more white, glowing orange, and then eventually overnight or with rain, just ashes. Memory can trace it forward and backward. I've never seen it before. I can't trace it forward. A child couldn't know what will happen to this tree, to this log if fire is put to it. But once one has gone through the whole thing and remembered it, from that memory one can say this log will turn into firewood. I know it from memory. And this memory from the past can project a future in which something will happen that one remembers has happened in the past. Does one get a feel for this? Not just intellectualizing it, but a feel for it that if I don't remember what the big tree looked like when it was little or before it was there, then it's just what it is now. But by remembering that it grew from little to big, I can also project that it will grow bigger in the future. This is how we talk. Can we see that without memory, this evolving as we feel it, see it, project it, wouldn't take place? In just observing a log put on the fire and no memory of what it was a minute ago when it wasn't cut yet, before the saw was put to it. We're talking hypothetically right now. Or maybe not hypothetically, because one can look at a log without memory and just see it as it is from moment to moment. Dark now, blackish white now, glowing now, glimmering now, a collapse now, less redness, more whiteness, and now just white stuff. When the mind is not engaged in thinking about what it is seeing, what is being seen, not thinking about it, not establishing through memory the past sequences and projecting future sequences, when that faculty is in abeyance and energy is just gathered in looking or listening, which are not two different things, looking and listening is one function. When this is disconnected from remembering and anticipating or expecting, then there's just what is. And then one understands that firewood does not turn into ashes. Everything at each moment is completely sufficient unto itself as it is, no matter what happened in the past or what may happen in a thought and memory projected future. Does that make some sense? Is that a way of exploring time? The connection in which it was mentioned by someone who wanted it to become a topic of a talk. The connection was, I don't quite understand when you or someone says, coming to understanding is not a matter of time, because everything tells me, everything I see around me and have learned and heard is that it takes time to become better. We need time to become a better person. Maybe to become enlightened takes time. Maybe not a little time, but a lot of time. Maybe not enough time in this lifetime, but future lifetimes to reach enlightenment. This is the teaching. Not only that it takes time, but that it takes space from here to there. Here, there is no enlightenment. That's not really the teaching, but this is how one thinks. But in an imagined future, at a future space and time, there will be enlightenment, or betterment, improvement. And thought, as we have examined and discovered, being so powerful an influence on this whole physical organism with its emotions, intentions, pains and fears, believes in this thought of time, that it takes time to become better, to become enlightened, that there's a path to move on toward something from here to there in time. Can one question all of that as being maybe a construct of thought and imagination? Testing it out as one thinks about the fact that it takes, not the fact, the idea that it takes time. And the authority of the scriptures or teachers who have said that, or are still saying it, they must know. Can one examine minutely, simply, how thought creates time? And that creation of time interval that it takes from here to goodness knows when, until I will become enlightened, or have insight, or be rid of my problems. That thought, in fact, is creating this thing called time. The idea of an interval between now and some future event. A long interval, a short interval. Thought creates that. Also thought from memory, saying, well, it took me a long time to even get here. All the years. That seems to be a proof. Remembering all the years one hasn't even sat down quietly to look inwardly, to listen inwardly and outwardly. And because one hasn't done it for a long time and has finally started, the assumption is that it does take time, or the conclusion. Because in retrospect, it took a lot of time for me to get this far. So it has to, logically thinking, take time to get further. And that thought can stay with us until we die. This is why it's so essential to question who is the one, or not who is the one, that's already a loaded question, as though there was someone. What is creating this thought of time? What is creating time? And what is the effect of this creation by the brain of the thought of time? The effect is postponement, expectation, entering into practices, doing things one is told in order to get to a place. Has all the effect of thinking in terms of time. But time itself is thought, activity. Can there be insight into that? We don't know whether it takes time to have insight. We think it does. We've been told it does. We've read about it. And we're prepared for a long haul, a lot of preparation. And constant expectation of something to happen, which is also thought. Do we see that? Something must happen or could happen now. Thought based on the desire to get someplace, to get something, to find something. And placing that event through thought into the future based on the past, what one has heard and read and discussed with others. And all the while this is going on, not the openness to be aware of it all, of this thought going on, have insight, seeing it, listening to it directly as it's operating. When that takes place, a moment of insight into it, or direct listening, in that there is no sense of time. Because direct listening or looking, listening/looking, is not based on thought. It's based on nothing. It comes on its own. Not in any human-created system of time. And in that direct seeing of what thought does, the narrowness or the narrowing down of the activity and expectation of thought, in that insight there is no time. There is surprise to see something. And surprise maybe, as thought picks it up again, that it did not involve any time, namely any thinking, namely any expectation. We talked the other day about this universal feeling of insufficiency in ourselves. Feeling insufficient, isolated, separate entities, which happens the moment the thought takes hold that we are in fact a separate entity, with the imagery that goes along with it. Imagery that has been put upon us by the parents, you're this, you're that, you should be this and you shouldn't be that. All of this creates instantly a collage of images about ourselves as separate from others, of whom we also have images. And very, very early in life, we may not be 2 years old yet or earlier, there also comes a feeling of guilt about being bad, a feeling of longing because the mother isn't there or is rejecting one or just doesn't have time. Maybe it's inevitable that a little organism. I don't know whether it's inevitable. In our culture, it seems that way, that separation anxiety has to set in very early. Because most mothers don't carry their babies around with them all the time. Nurse them when they're hungry. The proximity there all the time. The warmness, closeness. Maybe the whole birth process of which is a actual physical separation already causes feelings and remembrances of separation, or once no separation, once a total being taken care ofness inside the womb. So wherever it has come from, that memory, verbal as well as non-verbal, of not being at one, non-separate, but separate, isolated, on one's own, apart. That makes inevitably for the feeling of insufficiency in human beings. At one time or another, sooner or later. And maybe right instantly out of that, a yearning for wholeness again, for non-separation, for belonging, which tradition, culture, and the brain operating to solve problems channels into all kinds of activities. This intrinsic desire to be whole, to not be apart. And we talked about that at length, trying to find the right person to unite with, or the right career to take over one's whole being, or to get a lot of money, possessions, fame, or spiritual achievement belongs into the same field of insufficiency and wanting to become sufficient again, whole. And out of this wanting, isn't out of this projected the idea of time? The thought about reaching the paradise, the blessed land, the blissful state without the problems of anxiety and panic. Why in the future? Why did we come to think that this lies in the future? Is that because of the very nature of thought? Thought itself taking time to think. And there's already, we can't even trace it now, there's this tremendous body of lore, myth, about the time it takes to do the tasks, to get to the place. And are the myths there because it's what we've always done as human beings, set out to find the promised land? And from that come the myths of one who went out to seek it and maybe found it. And because he took time or she took time, therefore it must take time. And it must be in the future, which we think up. The future is thought up at this moment of sitting. Let's try it out. Listening, feeling open. Where is the future? That must be a thought. have to think of what I'm going to do tomorrow when the retreat is over. Or what is it going to be for lunch? It creates time, because lunch time is not here now, but you can imagine it. And you know it's at 12 or right around there. And by thinking that way, time and future have been created. And here-ness is gone, except the activity of thought, which is also taking place right now and can be seen into this instant as it takes place, projecting a future. I'm wondering whether, as long as this feeling of being an insufficient one, me, insufficient, as long as that image is there, and with that image the feeling, and with the feeling the image, they create each other. There is wanting to be otherwise, isn't there? To be different, not to be insufficient. And with that, the creation of time and paths and goals. Time in the future. That's why we're asking, what is that insufficient one? Let's examine that and not travel in fantasy land with the thoughts into a fantasized, imagined future. Remain with what is there, no matter how painful or disagreeable or anxiety-ridden it may be. What is it? Right here, right now, without knowing it, because that's fantasy again. That's not the real thing, knowing it, labeling it, having theories about it or diagnoses about it. That's not the real thing. The real thing is sitting right here. What is it? Thoughts of insufficiency, of lack, of want, of need, of future. See it as it arises. Seeing it doesn't mean keeping spinning it out. It's just seeing what's going on right this moment. Thoughts about a better future. Out of a feeling of discontent with what is here now. But we don't know really what is here now. We only have ideas about it. What is here now? Allowing whatever feelings previous thought has aroused, momentarily or chronically, allowing those to be felt. Allowing them to take whatever space they need, not hemming them in through thought on all sides, saying, you don't feel this way, you should feel differently. This is unbearable. So this hems in a feeling that the body has naturally produced on the basis of signals from thoughts in the brain. So allow that body to do its thing, which it is doing in accord with what the brain seems to be signaling. The brain may be making a mistake in its signals. We have to question everything, whether there is really danger when we're afraid, whether there is really insufficiency when we feel so insufficient. So, what is it? Get directly into it. Directly meaning just that. Know no separation, no thought about myself suffering this, no thought about myself having to endure this, no thought about myself having to transcend this. That all creates confusion and separation from what's there, which I don't know what it is. I only have ideas about it. Do you see that? What we're asking is, can there be, as it were, a dying to all ideas about ourselves? What we are not, what we should be not, a dying to all of this imagery. Not knowing what we are, not taking refuge in knowing anything. Just with what's there, blindly as it were. Not the little candlelight of knowing what we are, but the darkness of not knowing what we are. And what this is that's going on right now. What everything is around us. Just being there. With everything, or rather, as everything. And as an expectant thought arises, will this get me enlightenment? See it as a thought. That's not a thought. What is it? The word bird doesn't cover it, does it? Or maybe it covers it. We may not be what we think we are. We're free to question that. So then what are we? What is everything? When pictures and images and story is just seen for what it is, the movement of thought, creating time. At this instant of no time, we will end here for today.